Hello. I'm going to interrupt my music playing just to chat to you a little bit. So my background is in inequality. Okay, that's what I studied. That's what I worked in for over a decade. I studied gender, um, like norms and practices and policy, and I don't think people understand. Okay, so my mic's not working. It's more trouble than it's worth sometimes. Um, yeah, so I want to argue that I think gender plays into people that vote reform. And I'm going to take a guess without looking. I have seen one post that has said this, but I could have easily have guessed that. I'm going to assume that a large percentage of the reform voters are men. So, with masculinity and how we see masculinity as a culture, let's just take Anglo, like UK gender norms, right? So, gender is used to control populations in various ways, including in international policy. In India, for example, I think in the 18th century, maybe 19th century, mid 19th century, um, the British colonial empire was trying to take away rights from local Indians. And what they did is they created this idea of like the primal masculine, which is like white, like chunky, hench, military, army kind of masculinity. It's like called militarized masculinity. And it's used in loads of different ways. So, in the policy and in the kind of propaganda about that policy, they were talking about how, oh, Indian women really need like strong white men, essentially. That was the subtext. They feminize the whole stereotype of feminization of Indian men that still exists today. That is that mechanism of gender being used in that context for passing policy. And it was basically like we can't give you the rights that you want because we need to look after you because for you like you have your feminized Indian men and you need this strong white masculine English kind of takeover, and that policy was successful. So what I'm trying to say is like gender is a massive part of everything, basically from your like day-to-day moments to like international policy, but like it's ignored and it's actually stigmatized and demonized on purpose by the powers that be. Like, why do you think you have such a negative view of feminism or that word? And part of it is because, like with any area, like feminism has been loaded with its own troublesome history, like white supremacy and patriarchy and sexism and everything else and transphobia. Like with any area, which is important for us to pay attention to, and the powers that be want us to hate feminism and target it because it attacks them and it unravels their power and it allows us to see through certain lenses which we wouldn't have otherwise. If you don't have a gender lens, you will not see really important insights that come from gender inequality. Anyway, so what I'm about to say is about I assume that lots of reform voters are men, and I think that's because that's what they think masculinity is, and especially like UK British masculinity. And if you think about it, they're right. Like traditional masculinity is based on racism, it is based on colonization, it is based on sexism, and like prejudice against men as well, like making men ready for the military, essentially, making them like ascribe to certain beauty standards and certain ways of how to look like men, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, but also like British culture has so much racism, ableism, sexism, transphobia, etc. in it because of our colonial history that it's almost like a part of British identity to be FASCIST. To the point where I've read research before, and a lot of what I'm saying has been researched, okay, to the point where like I've read research where migrants come over here and they start being FASCIST and RAS, oh god, CIST, because for them that's assimilating into British culture. How messed up is that? You have migrants that are here who are anti-migrants because they're trying to assimilate into our culture because we're so anti-migration, unnecessarily so. And that's another thing that I need to come on to later is like I am so pro immigration. Immigration has been impacted my life in such great ways. I'm an immigrant. I currently live in Scotland. Um, and with the climate crisis, there's no way you can't control immigration now. There's no way you're going to be able to control it with the climate collapsing. So the best you can do is create a supportive, loving, caring, amazing community that support everyone, including migrants, which you probably are one. as well. So like, but anyway, yeah. So anyway, so I haven't got to my point. God, this is hard. I'm autistic and stuff, and this is my like, I'm really nerdy about this area, so it's like really hard to like stay on point. So what I'm trying to say is that it might feel more masculine for someone to vote for reform compared to voting for the Greens. Okay, so my background's in ecofeminism. I study how gender and the environment interact. Okay, and research shows that masculinity, in fact, what I think, and I'm sure has been researched, but why I think we have the masculine norms that we have is that it allows us basically to be seen to be supporting the Greens or the environment or ecological things is often emasculated as an area because it's a feminized area. Even like nature itself, in Mother Nature, right? And that's part of why people don't vote Green, and also is part of why a lot of men partake in environmental destructive activities, you know, like chopping down trees and mining and blah, 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 blah. So like that has been built into masculinity also so that men separate from nature, so that plays into the destruction of nature as well. And it's been proven by research that men see protective actions towards the environment as feminine and emasculating. And so that does impact how people vote. Obviously, there's so many elements at play, but you know, people need to understand that like it's like the most manly thing ever to stick up for the environment. Like masculinity needs to be redefined, not according to patriarchal, colonial, sexist, transphobic, ableist, anti-intersex people like norms and rules. And you know, if men are feeling lonely because they are struggling with like masculinity norms that are that destructive, then they should be lonely until they learn how to be a human without these gender norms. And that's one of the privileges I have as a non-binary person. I've known that I'm non-binary for my whole life, but I only got the language recently, and I've been able to exit or as much as I can, or at least like move beyond gender norms to like really great success. And like it's great. So like it's so frustrating, like men are suffering so much, and it's because of the same thing, and yet many are voting for the opposite of what's going to help them. Obviously, like I've explained already, that if we don't end capitalism will end us, right? So like the opposite of reform is what's going to get us in a good place. But anyway, we have to realize and understand and feel in our bodies that like protecting ourselves and each other and the environment and vulnerable people is the most masculine thing ever. And then we get into this charted land, or very hard land of like a lot of diversity work and gender work is very like trippy and like beyond binary thinking, and it gets really hard to articulate. But like you have to like, even though gender is created, it's also been created, so we have to have a form of reference. So that's why I'll still refer to like femininity and masculinity, and also it's a shorthand for you to know what I'm talking about. Yeah, anyway. And it's like so frustrating because like, well, this is a serious point, that like men are suffering with their mental health. A lot of that is to do with the lack of being able to articulate and feel and understand and express and identify their emotions, for example. And when I worked in the Samaritans, we were taught to talk to people directly about the dark things, talk to them directly about the S word if they were feeling like that. If you're a man and you've been socialized your whole life to not talk about your emotions, say, for example, I know lots of men that do that, but like it's still very different to women and how we've been socialized, and femme people and AFABs, assigned female people at birth. So like that's a privilege that I have as a woman. And well, I'm actually non-binary, but I'm socialized as a woman, right? So I have easier access into emotional like discussion, for example. And that alone is one example of how patriarchy just messes us all up, and to men's detriment as well. There's so much more I could say, but yeah, I'll stop for now.